So please, like I requested some time back, please introduce yourself to the group by, entering your name and location in the chat box. This is the purpose for us to know each other and from where you're logging in, as it's very encouraging to see people from all over the world being here. Yeah. For today's session, you will receive 1 CCU units and 0.5 RD units. We will post a claim form towards the end of the session. And you have 2 days, that is until 25th of November, to make your claims. And participants who are eligible for this will receive your CC units by end of 2 weeks from then. So welcome all of you to this learning session brought to you by the Community of Practice, Team and Group Coaching of ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter. And allow me to introduce you to the hosting team for this session. My name is Kavita Lobo, and I'm your host for today. And with me in the hosting team, we have Sagarika Kantaria. Both Sagarika and myself lead the Community of Practice for Team and Group Coaching. We are members of ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter, both PCC. And with us, we also have Nandini Agaskar helping us with admin and tech. She works very closely with the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter Management. Yeah. So as we are all beginning to settle in, and let me just quickly share a few house rules with all of you. So kindly keep your videos off and mute your mics through the webinar until we open the house for the interaction. Thank you so much for the quick action here from all of you. And so this is to primarily avoid disruption in the transmission that could be caused due to bandwidth issues. Now, during the session, you may have few burning questions, and we do understand that. And so just a request to hold on to it. You can put your questions in the chat box, and Sagarika will prompt our speaker or curate them for the Q&A segment that will happen towards the end of the session today. And for those who wish to claim their CCU units for this session, like I mentioned some time back, we will post a link of a Google form in the chat box, sometimes just before the session ends today. And please use that link to enter your name, full name, as you wish it to appear in your CCU unit certificates, and with your correct email ID. We also invite you to stay on after the session for 15 minutes of networking and sharing after a quick feedback poll that will happen. So that's on the house rules. And now let's begin. So I once again welcome all of you to this masterclass brought to you by the Community of Practice Team and Group Coaching. We are members of ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter. And today's topic is psychological safety in team coaching and its impact on business. And I know all of us are very curious to know what is this and would like to explore this topic deeply. And there are a few objectives that we are setting out right in the beginning, a couple of them being, what is our common understanding of the word psychological safety? And we as our coaches, what is our style and how does that impact on psychological safety? And for this, we have an expert with us, that is Saraswathi Anand. She's our expert speaker, and she's going to be facilitating the session for us today. And thank you so much, Saraswathi, for coming in. She's an MCC coach, an ICF, ICTC, and EMCC certified team coach. She's a mentor coach and whole systems change practitioner. She's a co-founder of Systemic Coaching International, founding member and secretary of our own ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter. And yes, so one of the key purpose that she has is, she believes in building dialogic coaching culture. And a little fun fact about Saraswathi is that she never forgets, or she rarely forgets names and faces. So watch out, people, she's not going to forget us. She's going to remember all of us as she's going to share with us her insight. She's going to tell us more about the topic through her experience. And I am super excited and really looking forward to learn a lot. And I hope I hope I'm voicing all of you too, right? So with no further ado, Saraswathi, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Kavita. Thank you, Mumbai chapter, and thank you, Tushima, Sagarika, Nandini, and all the others for having me over here. It feels a little strange. Strange because I am normally on the other side. Now I'm on this side, so therefore feels a little strange. Um, and yeah, I thought maybe that spot of sharing vulnerability may help us kick off our session on psychological safety. Um, I know, Kavita mentioned that I'm an expert. If I were an expert, then psychological safety would not be an emerging concept today. So therefore, what I believe is that any um, concept or an idea, even team coaching, is something that grows and it keeps on increasing, and there are only thresholds that becomes better and better. So our job is to try and keep on track and keep up pace with whatever these changes are happening. And so therefore, before we start off, I just thought I will quickly share one question, and let me just share my screen. Just give me a moment. Do give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks, Kavita. Thank you. All right. So I thought, why not start off with everybody here would have had some experience of either being in a team, working with a team, either as an internal person or an external person. So, in the team that you have worked with or you are working with, what is it that told you about the state of psychological safety? And you will notice I've used PS in most cases. So, psychological safety is PS. But yeah, so it would be good to have you put it in the chat. And I would request, Kavita and Sagarika to support me in picking out those ones which should be relevant.
Certainly, certainly. I'll read out some of the responses that are coming. Like Ruchi mentioned, absenteeism. Chitra says freedom of folks to share openly and what they need to. Shanti says when everyone has a voice and all voices are heard. Rashna says silence. Arvind says how open the conversations are. People feel safe. I'm going to just read out now. Psychological safety is felt permission for candor and its emergent property of the group. The level of engagement, openness, and team spirit, not openly spoken. If individuals are able to adopt a fail forward approach, candor in the group, the extent to which mistakes are encouraged, held against you, connect with the team once you feel safe, energy of the group. I'm just reading out, I'm not sharing names and, I hope that's okay. It is believed that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, to be themselves and express without inhibitions, whether efforts are encouraged, undermined, and thank you so much, everybody here, for sharing that. To be themselves and express without inhibitions, whether efforts are encouraged or undermined. Corridor talks come into the room. Where creativity and risk taking is encouraged, when one feels that they can take risk and even if they fail, they will be supported and someone has their back. Minority feels free to speak, and such can then be validated with the silent majority. A team freely shares their ideas. There's lots that's coming. It's interesting question, Saraswati. Great idea. A belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. Where someone can be true to themselves and others, no fear of retaliation for sharing your feelings and opinions. Yeah, so far that's what has been coming. I hope you were able to put that together in your head.
Wow. And just to share, so it looks like all aspects of psychological safety has been covered in whatever has come up in chat. Having said that, there are some which talk about feelings, some which talk about states. There were a few which spoke about how, some of the beliefs or mental models. So it's a combination of all of this which seems to talk about psychological safety. And all these are some well-feeling, some action, some belief, some states which are experienced. All that seems to be coming up. And therefore, I thought it would be a good idea now to share. Okay. Maybe let me start with this. So what would we actually cover here today? And that's the agreement that I thought we could have. And the agreement on this is about how can we have a common language around, common understanding around psychological safety, understand what is the business impact. And as a coach, particularly a team coach, how could you foster psychological safety in teams? So a lot of it that came up spoke about psychological safety being a belief. And this is what Amy Edmondson says, who's the expert on, who actually coined the term and did more research on psychological safety. He talks about it as a belief that nobody will be punished, humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes, and that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking. And the reason why you would have noticed that there is belief highlighted there, a belief stems from our experiences, which then gets converted into our mental models. So, therefore, psychological safety is a belief or a mental model that people have based on their experiences, which help them understand if I were to speak up, if I were to share, what could happen? What are the consequences of that? Right? And because it is a belief, we also call it as an environment. It's an experience which is created not just by me, but also by the people around. I'm going to stop share for a minute and share with you a little story. And the story is about, if you're all jazz lovers and you would have followed Miles Davis. Miles Davis was the trumpeter and Jimi Hendrix was the pianist. Jimmy, I hope I'm saying his name right. And the combination of these two created many music, and there were many people in the jazz band as well. So the pianist actually spoke about an experience because Miles Davis was already an established musician by then, jazz musician by then. And if crowds came to watch Miles Davis play, and therefore the jazz band. And what the pianist spoke about was an experience where they noticed, and jazz music, the way it is played is, somebody plays, somebody follows. It's a little structured, less structured, so to speak. Right? And the way that happened, in that moment, the pianist actually played a wrong note. They were in front of the audience, huge participants, and there was a wrong note that got played. So obviously the pianist's heart was in the mouth. And what they were expecting was something to happen, some reaction that would happen. Miles Davis apparently turned around, looked at the person, smiled, picked up the note which is not there in the set of in the set of the musical notes, and they actually created new music. And this is only as an example to say, if psychological safety is a belief that, hey, I'm not going to be punished for, or I'm not going to be punished for what I'm going to say, for the mistakes that I make, for the ideas that I share, then it's about actually the environment that gets created through that. So it is not just about a person, but it's actually about the group that is actually fostering or creating this as an environment. Having said that, I think another very simple thing to notice, it's a very hard thing to create. Just imagine if you're working on mental models, if you're working on things which are going to create experiences for people to have those kind of beliefs, then it is a hard thing to create, because you're working on something which is not tangible. At the same time, it is a felt need. So how do you actually enable? So it's not something that people are used to. For people to come up and share something, it's not a natural thing to say. They would think many a time. So therefore, it's a hard thing to create as well. So what does that mean? Based on the experiences, based on the behaviors, based on the mental models that's happening, psychological safety is an emergent property. That is, it is something that emerges due to the experiences, the behaviors, the actions, and which are contributing to say, okay, now I can possibly be safe and say things. And therefore, the point of view that is waiting to be expressed and the willingness, and I think this is where psychological safety becomes an emergent property. When I'm willing to talk about it based on the environment that happens, that's what gives rise to psychological safety. Okay. I'm also going to share with you a small little example that happened. While working with a team, this team believed that everything was going very well for them. And when we were having conversations, understanding what this team was all about, there seemed to be a lot of good things that were happening in the organization, and that's great. When we started looking a little bit deeper, and they decided that they really want to work on something where they can become a better team, when we started examining that, one of those things that came up was, while we are good today, would this be good enough for tomorrow? And therefore, how can we actually start working on the psychological safety, which is which is actually coming up here, and which we think is works today but does not work tomorrow. So the willingness to speak up was one of these aspects that they wanted to work on. And I'm just going to go back a little bit. And the reason I wanted to go back a little bit is to typically psychological safety and trust gets confused. And the reason they get confused is because they sound the same. But actually, there is a difference between the two. And the difference between the two is, while trust, and based on the trust equation, it talks about credibility, it talks about reliability, and it also talks about the empathy that a person has. It's about interactions which happen between two people, or it can also be between a stakeholder and the team. So, for example, if I'm in the purchase function and I'm working with other functions, it could be how the stakeholder actually believes, trusts me that I will deliver procuring the product in time for them. So that's what trust is about. It's about interactions between these two, two parties, and it's also about how we know, and this entire statement, right? Yes, we need this item, and this item will be procured in time when we need it. And that's about a future. You can trust them to do something that will happen in a future moment. And it's about interpersonal giving benefit of the doubt. So whether it is the team, stakeholder to the team, or it is two people amongst themselves. Whereas psychological safety is about whatever are the interactions which are taking place at the group level. So it doesn't talk about only one person. It talks about how the entire group is creating that environment, or which helps me believe that I can actually here come and talk about it. So it could be, while there may be good relations between people in the group, but it's still, as a group, are we, or as a team, are we willing to accept, and are we willing to allow people to speak their mind? And that is the candor. And therefore, it's a felt sense. And it's about, instead of giving others the benefit of doubt, will I be given the benefit of doubt in order to ask for help, in order to say, hey, I made a mistake, or in order to say, hey, what, I think this will work better than what you're saying. So how can And that's really the difference between psychological safety and trust. So what does it actually mean for business? And here, if you were to start looking uh, from a point of view of what does it, how does it help businesses do better, it actually stemmed from the Project Aristotle study of Google. That was one of those things which kind of put it into place. And Project Aristotle actually talked about effective teams are. It did not talk about whether teams are delivering what they're supposed to deliver. It spoke about how effective teams are. And when they started looking at that, one of the most important things that came up for them is it doesn't matter who makes the team, it's about how the team is working together. And that team to be working together, one of those biggest elements, and which is why they put psychological safety as the first part, as being the most important element in terms of defining how effectively a team is working. So here there is a lot of statistics, and I'm just going to keep it short because I think this is what would be useful. Psychological safety directly impacts things like employee engagement, motivation, performance, satisfaction, willingness to collaborate, and so on and so forth. But the lack of it, and I think this is the narrative which has become uh, more and more pronounced today, and particularly post pandemic, is that if you do not have psychological safety also, or if you have low psychological safety, that also leads to a lot of impact on business. So in terms of decrease in productivity, in terms of turnover, in terms of mental health issues for people, in terms of well-being of people, and in terms of absenteeism. And one of those things that also came up in our chat, saying it results in absenteeism, it results in employee turnover. In the long run, it could actually impact your employer brand and therefore create a competitive disadvantage for people. So having said that, psychological safety actually helps people to start looking at how their contributions, if their contributions are mattering, they're able to speak up and they're able to talk about it without fear that I'm going to be reprimanded for it. It actually increases my engagement and motivation. If people are more comfortable about saying what they feel, sharing different ideas, it may help the decision making become better. And if they're also comfortable about sharing, hey, I made a mistake, you are possibly able to not just stop a consequence that could have happened, taken that action to reverse that consequence, and also it becomes a learning moment. And therefore, psychological safety, while it has, there are all these were very many numbers and statistics, etc. What it actually helps do is engagement, motivation, better decision making, continuous learning environment. Because psychological safety actually talks about if there are different perspectives and there's a team which is discussing, there is something that needs to happen, there are many different perspectives that come up. How do you actually look at each of those perspectives to decide collectively what could be the best possible way of best possible option to choose there? So there's already some learning that is implicit in what is happening. So we spoke about effective teams and we spoke about performance. So effective teams uh, are those which have high psychological safety or better psychological safety than the others. And what does it actually tell you is if this team, and I was talking to you about this experience of working with an organization, and everybody was really things seem to be going very well, and which was great for the organization. Soon in our one-to-one conversations, we started figuring out that there were a lot of things which could not be expressed openly in the larger group, which actually came up in those one-to-one conversations. And that was very evident about how the mood of this team was and how things get done in this organization. So while they seem to be very high comfort, but there is something, but that comfort need not mean that they are actually working well together. The comfort could also mean that I don't want to upset the applicant, and that's fine, right? And I would like to stay with it. So in where, so I think this is where psychological safety and candor, they both go hand in hand. So if I can speak my mind and not worry about how it is going to be reacted to, then there are chances that the decision making, the consequences, the learning, and therefore a better output to happen, and innovation and creativity, because there are different perspectives that have come up, to actually increase. Therefore, if you do have low standards and low psychological safety, then that is something to worry about, because it means that nobody cares. If there is high standards, and these standards are performance standards, so if there are, standards are still low, but your psychological safety is very high, it could possibly mean that, hey, you know what, we don't want to upset the apple cart. There is something going on here, and we will continue with it. We don't want to put a toe out of line. Typically, in hierarchical organizations, this is something that could be happening, because there is a deference to hierarchy that happen in those organizations. In organizations where performance may be high, standards are very high, but there is low psychological safety, where I can't share, where I can't make a mistake, where I have to, do things, the way it is supposed to be done. And so therefore, possibly if I'm making a mistake, I'm covering up the mistake. But at the same time, the mood of this team is more in terms of anxiety, stress. Am I actually, can I make a mistake here, or I have to make sure? So imagine if I don't get things in time from another function that I'm expecting, or from another, input giver for me, then I will be putting that kind of pressure on them, saying that I need it. I need it because I have to deliver. So you can't say no to me, while they may be having some genuine issues as well. So it constantly, the environment around, and that's what we spoke about, psychological safety is an environment. The environment is of anxiety. If you do have high psychological safety and performance standards are also high, then we are able to look at what happens, what are we doing today, how are we doing it, are we doing it well, are there better ways of doing it? And that's why it's psychological safety, as Project Aristotle said, is about how it defines effective teams or high performing teams. And that's the assumption that if you do have high psychological safety, then the performance will also be better. The teams will be far more effective, more collaborative, because they are willing to talk about, listen to diverse perspectives, reflect on them, pick up the best ones, make mistakes, share them, rectify them, and go ahead and deliver what they think. So this is another question that kind of came up. In the teams that you have worked with, right? In the teams that you've had experience with, what are some of the indicators that helped you see what is the mood or the psychological state of this team? Can we put it in chat and have a response to that? Kavita, I know I sprung a surprise on you. You're on mute.
Sorry, I said I'm very much curious to know what's going to come up. So we have Chitra who says, yeah. So the mood here, right?
Yeah. So in your experience, what indicators helped you determine the mood or the psychological state of the team? I'm going to stop share, so it becomes easy.
So we'll wait for people to respond, all the participants to respond. Here we have Chitra who says, how much folks share candor available? Kenneth says, thrive on creativity and collaboration. Ruchi says, participation involvement. We have Alice saying, body language, eye contact, contribution, tone of voice, openness. Shanti says, people are able to share, speak up without the fear of for consequences. People take risk and learn from failures. Yeah, Vibhu says, who speaks more often, others invited to speak, who sits where, etc. A lot of them coming up. So now I'm going to just read the response, and thank you so much for responding here. Now, clear communication indicators can be disinterest during the meeting, not participating, can celebrate each other's success, focus on collective goal, where dissent is encouraged. Yeah. These are some of disagreements are aired. Challenge the boss is okay. New ideas flowing in the organizations, enhance creativity. That's a lot of things when they're sharing and what you are sharing, and I can go back to my own experience and say yes, so true. Yeah, here we some more shares have come. Communication is free, maybe even irrelevant and direct, no hidden agenda. Aspirational, encouraging, and balanced, where work and holidays are both celebrated. Speak up, yeah. Speaking up, sharing experiences and out of the box views, and also if someone is quiet, it doesn't mean they're shy. Fear of speaking up. It's a mix of high peace, PR, psychological safety, as well as low psychological safety. But the efforts and are just not just results are recognized, not just where the efforts and not just results are recognized. Higher retention. I go home feeling good. I like the words, but failure is feedback and not reprimand. Yeah. Where people want to hang around with each other beyond work, yes, absolutely. Reciprocity is all in all areas and across the organization. The openness and willingness to share personal challenges.
I just wanted to share an example. There were some such beautiful points that came up. Things which are just purely at a feeling base, things which are actual actions, that are happening. Things which are, which is also about an outcome. Where there is a focused goal. We are all working towards one goal, etc. So there are many such indicators that are coming up. So I want to share about one organization, and I'll also share with you about a challenge that is going on in a current organization, and a challenge, and I'll share a little bit about a failure a little later. So this organization is a high knowledge oriented organization. So there's a lot of skills, capability, etc. that this organization is. That's the base of this organization. That's their work. And in that, and here we are working with the leadership team. Now, the leadership team of this organization has, so there is a context and a background, and I'll share that a little, where one of them who was at the same level has suddenly now become the CEO. So they're all reporting into this person who was one amongst them. So organization, knowledge, skill oriented, based on capabilities, and where one of them has become the CEO. They are working on a change initiative. And while they're working on a change initiative, and they have huge growth plans, to get even one decision through the leadership council is a huge challenge. Because there are a lot of people who believe, and this is where this is the felt need. So it doesn't go through very easily. So there are how this organization is currently working is trying to create subsystems which is going to help work, help get these things through, right? Um, but nobody wants to sit down and have that conversation, saying that, hey, you know what? While, whatever we may have amongst us, this is what we are focused on. What we need to do differently. So the conversation is continuously about tasks. The conversation is continuously about what needs to happen. So there is a lot of opining, there is a lot of perspective, and all of that keeps happening in this team. Decisions taken are not followed. So you don't know whether that's the decision taken. That's the confusion that is existing in this organization. And it's interesting because nobody wants to have a conversation, sit down there and say, hey, can we get this out of the way? And the reason to share this is we just spoke about the mood, we spoke about performance. In organizations, a lot of psychological safety is also driven by the top, in terms of how you role model it, in terms of how you accept it. So if you're working with a team which is lower down in the system, and you have the leadership team which doesn't buy into psychological safety, I really wonder what's going to happen with working on psychological safety with this team, which is nested, in the system. While they may be doing wonderfully well and wanting to do a lot of other things, but they need to have enough resilience to know that the system is going to be the way it is, because this is the only influence that I could have. And therefore, psychological safety is also about how you can start looking at leaders who are actually going to help influence and help implement this in the organization. That's another thing which is emerging as important, and particularly with this case study that I'm involved in, it's very clear that the leadership team needs to have that conversation, needs to have, catch the bull by its horns. If they're not going to have this organization, whatever decision gets made, and they have wonderful plans, they all remain on paper. Nothing gets implemented. I just wanted to share that because a lot of what you said in the chat is what is also experienced in this thing. All right. So if that is the case, let me just go back. I'm just going to, while we get into the role of team coach in fostering, psychological safety, I'm going to go back a little bit. And the reason why I want to go back is, how many, I don't know how to do this, maybe a better way to do this. How many of us work with teams today? Can we have a show of hands and kind of look at it? Can that be done?
Yeah, we can use the reaction icon. Yeah, it's from here.
All right. All right. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who will be working, with teams today, and somewhere. And the reason why I'm putting this out there is team coaching. There is also a kind of a thought that seems to be emerging. Team coaching is about sessions, or is team coaching about the engagement? So let me just share what my thought process is rather than keeping it. So team coaching is actually an entire engagement that you carry out with the team. And that engagement could also have coaching sessions which are part of it. But what makes team coaching different from most other team interventions is that how you showing up as a coach, and therefore you have your, you have your antennas up. That's what I'm going to use to be able to understand, look at, and therefore be curious about things that are happening in the organization. And the reason why I wanted to share this is because now we're getting into looking at what is the role of a team coach in fostering in fostering psychological safety. So this is the ICF definition, which most of you would be familiar with. It's about it's a partnership. It is a co-creative and reflective process with the entire team as one client and working with its dynamics, relationships, so that they're able to maximize their abilities and potential to reach their common purpose and shared goals. So, what is the role of a team coach in coaching teams? And this is something that uh, has come up through the experiences uh, that that are there. The role of a team coach is to create that environment so that the process of coaching, which is a dialogic process, is carried out in a manner so that the team is able to think better, reflect better, and create awareness so that they're able to build their capacity. And therefore, what does it mean? So, one, like psychological safety, it's creating the environment. Two, the process is a dialogic process. So, if you need to have candor, if you need to have ability to speak up, if you need to bring up different perspectives, it's about having those better dialogues. And that's what a team coach enables. When you have these dialogues, and the whole purpose of coaching is learning and growth and development, it's about helping this client, which is the team, to reflect better, think better, so that they're able to not just build their capability, but also build their capacity. And capacity is all about, the level of complexity, the volume. So how to actually have in a career development state, we would HR would basically talk about it as saying, are you ready for the next level? So similarly, here it is about building the capacity for the next level, whatever that next level is. Yeah. And that's the role of a team coach in terms of, and very closely linked with psychological safety. Mm. And if you look at the competence number 4, which actually deals with cultivates trust and safety, um, you would notice, and if you've got the document, you would notice that there is a narrative which is given before you actually see this blue and yellow parts. And the narrative, one of the first narrative of this is to say the team coach must build a space within which each team member feels free to disagree with teammates or raise sensitive topics. So typically the words that are used are encourages, promotes, partners. This is one of the few competencies where it actually says the team coach must. And it also says the team coach should enable expression of individual team members and collective team feelings. How will they able to help them express? So these are two aspects which are coming up very strikingly different even in the ICF team coaching competencies. Only to say that, so therefore the role of a team coach is also um, having that kind of understanding and agreement with the team so that they're able to create that environment. And that is a co-created understanding and a co-owned understanding that they have with the team as to how will they create that environment for them. So what are meta skills that a team coach needs? While all competencies are important, none of these, there is no hierarchy in the competencies, but there are some meta skills that are, clearly coming up for team coaching. And those stem from presence. Presence to the entire system, the whole system, which is the largest system prevalent in the organization, the system of the team, and the system of myself. So, how am I present to that? Which talks about not just the team, their situation, which is task and context, it's a combination of everything. So, how can meta skills of team coach is how do I bring my presence here? And very interestingly, um, when you are doing one to many, the stimulus is lots, which is why they also advocate having a co-coach. The reason for that is because of this, lot of stimulus that's coming. How do you actually bring your presence to whatever is happening in that entire system? So that is a meta skill. And the other meta skill is use of self. Now, use of self is actually about what you're present to yourself and how to bring it into action. So, how do you offer your self experience for reflection for the team? So recently, I was having a conversation with the team leader, and the team leader was the head of HR. And in that conversation, I realized that there was a discomfort with what was being planned. And I realized that comfort I could not give that client either. And therefore, I had to now first accept for myself that I'm not able to give that comfort to the client. Because here I was playing the role of a consultant as well as a coach. But having said that, that means that I'm using myself, I needed to bring up that experience to say, hey, you know what? There seems to be a little lack of clarity that we are having here. I'm looking at it this way. How are you looking at it? And that conversation helped us clarify. And therefore, how do you bring yourself, your presence to yourself into core by through your action? And therefore, how are you going to? And for that, what do you need? The first thing is to be able to say, hey, you know what? I can bring this up. Two, do I have the courage to bring it up? So, one is I can bring this up. Two is if I bring it up, is it okay? Courage to bring it up. Three, if I start looking at about me, then I'm in trouble. But when I start looking at it, what is it going to benefit the other person? Then I have compassion towards why this is being brought up at all. So and therefore how I say it and the impact that I'm going to have. So confidence in self, the courage to speak, and the compassion to say it in a manner that it helps the other person as well to and the team members also to start looking at it from a perspective of from a consideration possible. So these are some of the meta skills that a team coach needs to have. So what about fostering psychological safety? Yeah. So let's look at that. So I think the first and foremost is it can be done as part of the process itself. Having an understanding and a clarity on what is the narrative for the need for psychological safety. It is not about a culture. It is not about being good to each other, but it is actually a need, a business need. I'm going to say it as a business need. What is that need for which this organization or this team needs to work on psychological safety? Having that, developing that narrative with the team. Once you, and also understanding though, how will it show up in terms of, in the team? What are the agreements that you need to have about the norms of psychological safety? And also looking at how you're going to put that into action. So, which will mean putting those norms into action. And if somebody is not following those norms, what would you also do? And how will you approach it? So, having that process in place in terms of the entire, the engagement that you have with the organization. Avita, you can see you smiling. So, I'm just wondering if something came up.
It's just while you're speaking up, a lot of things resonates with something recently happened at workplace. So, just like it feels, like you said, right, some time back that how it's not about being an expert. It's about as you share your own experience, uh, a lot of us feel that we are in the right path. So when you're sharing this, it just feels that, oh, what I'm doing is right. That gives us confidence.
Savita, I could only see you, and therefore I noticed the reaction.
I am, I guess I'm speaking up for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. And the next part is about yourself, focus on self. How are you managing your own emotions? How are you even noticing what's happening with you? How are you noticing what's happening with the team? And how can you, so when you notice, when somebody says something, immediately there's a, movement away of the head. Somebody says, okay, and there's got a raised eyebrow. Or if you notice that somebody is saying, there's a smile when somebody is saying something, hey, this is the suggestion that's coming up. Are you as a coach also looking at how you are being alert to what's happening around you? That's the presence part that we spoke. We spoke about courage, respectfulness, and compassion. And how are you also being vulnerable? And because nobody is an expert, the team is the expert of themselves. And team is also the expert of what they want to be. So if they need to be that, then you are not there to make things happen for them. You are there bringing up what's happening so that they can reflect on it and decide what they would like to do better. So how can you also bring your vulnerability to the uh, to the team, role model, and of course be encourage and be curious. And while there are many tools that you could use, which is the next block which is going to come up. So it's process itself, and there could be many tools that could be used. Actually, something that caught my eye, and this is and if you've read what Amy Edmondson also talks about, she says that how can you frame the work as learning? How can you frame the challenge as learning? That's something that she speaks about, and she actually talks about a case study that happens. So how can we use tools such as framing? Because what we said is psychological safety is a belief, and beliefs come from our experience, and those experience create mental models. So frames are basically mental models or a particular way of looking at things. So how can we use one of the tools that is available is how can you use reframing as a tool for the team so that they are able to look at whatever work, whatever challenge, whatever it is that they are looking at from a different lens. So from work to learning, and not just a problem of execution, not just a problem of saying, it'll not get done because, but actually looking at, okay, so if it were to happen, if it were not to happen, what would we lose by not making it happen? Right? So many aspects in terms of how we could reframe. So I thought we could possibly use this time to work through a small example. And using this tool of reframing. By the way, there are many such tools. You could use OPN, which Corentus talks about. You could use, above the line, below the line behaviors and indicators, saying that, are people using blame, defensiveness, etc. And above the line, below the line is from the book called Oz Principle. And you could also use, the four horsemen as indicators, which is propounded by the Gottman Institute, and they specialize in working with in relationship coaching. So all these are indicators that you could pick up so that you could see how you can rephrase it. What we're going to work with is an example using what patterns in dialogues that we can see. And this is called the four-player model. This four-player model was developed by David Cantor. And what the four-player model talks about is you have four kind of, I'm going to say, stances. So you can move, you can follow, you can oppose, or you can bystand. So what does that mean? when you're moving, the person is actually initiating or offering ideas and direction. So that is the stance of move. When you follow, then they complete what is said and help others clarify their thought and support what's happening. So follow are supporters, and follow will also look at, okay, so what would happen if you were to complete, this. So that's what, so they are commitment givers. They are people who are supporting the idea. That's what follow does. Oppose are people or stances that are taken when you challenge what is being proposed. So challenging, let's say a move that is being made. I'm initiating or offering an idea, and there is an opposition or a challenge that comes up because they are questioning its value, whether it works, and so on and so forth. And bystand, people who are waiting, watching, observing, and they're noticing what is happening, and they also provide a perspective to what is going on in that. Right? So they're basically people who are waiting and watching and saying, yeah, it sounds like this. Yes, it feels like this seems to be the priority. This is what you're saying as a priority right now. So that's just bystand. Okay. And if you don't have movers, there is no direction or there are no options. If you don't have followers, there is no completion that gets done. If you don't have opposers, then while it's a great idea, but when you start implementing it, you might notice so many things that need to be, adjusted, so to speak. And therefore, there is no correction that could happen. And without bystanders, there is no perspective, okay, that could be shared. So what are we going to do now? With the assumption that and so this is a real situation. So you're having a conversation with a dialogue which is going on within the team. And you're noticing that these dialogic patterns are emerging and people are getting stuck in these patterns. So the exercise is about how can we try to reframe this, and I'll just share the activity with you. So I'm just going to state what the activity is. If there are any questions, you could always clarify. So this is an activity which will be done in breakout room of 4 people. And the activity is, what could you do to enable the move to challenge framer? So for example, if there is an idea that is being promoted by person, how can you shift that to framing the challenge in such a manner, in framing the challenge that the team is trying to address? So shift from promotion of an idea to framing the challenge that the team is addressing. Post to inquirer, from sharing points against an idea to shift to framing questions around their concerns. From follow to implementer, from agreeing and supporting to shift to committing to make it happen. And from bystand to become a contributor. So from status, what is happening, to shift to what can they contribute.
So Saraswati,
Go ahead.
can we ask people, participants can click a picture of this, and that will help them to, have this conversation in the breakout room.
Yeah? Sure, absolutely.
We have a question, for clarification purpose. We have two questions. One is, Sandeep says, could bystanding also means playing for galleries? I think that.
So now you're talking about the motivations behind it. right? So a bystander is the motivation behind the bystanding about saying that, am I saying, Acha, this is also okay, that is also okay. Is that what it is? Actually, a bystand is when I'm not getting into it, but I'm watching. So I'm not engaged in moving, opposing, or doing anything, but I'm watching and I'm observing. And I'm saying that, from, so let's say I can even say that, other organizations seems to be doing this. It's a different perspective. So what? So, and this is very unique. Nobody else has done it before. So these are um, not in the active dialogue that's happening, but it's about waiting and watching as to what's happening in this conversation. So that's what bystanding is. I think there was one more question, right?
Yes, we have Tushima who's asking, what is the difference between implementer and contributor?
A great question. Actually, both great questions. So, implementer to contributor is, so moving from saying I follow, I support you, to saying I'm actually getting into implementation.
Action.
Yeah. So it is like it is like a commitment that you make. So instead of just saying that, yeah, I agree with you, to saying that, okay, what am I committing to make it happen? That's the difference. I hope that clarifies.
Yeah. And just to come back on the activity,
Hey,
what we're
Kavita,
doing.
sorry,
Yes.
I have a
Sorry,
follow
go ahead.
on my question. Is it okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Please.
So my question was the difference between the implementer and the contributor. So the follow becomes implementer, the bystand becomes contributor. What's the difference between these two?
Great for pointing out what I missed. So follow becomes implementer. Bystand, who's sitting and watching, is now become actively contributing to how either this conversation or what could be a better outcome. Can we do this in a different manner? So far I've just been sitting on the sidelines. Now you're actually getting into it, saying that how am I going to contribute, not just from an action and commitment perspective, saying contribute even with my thoughts and perspectives, right? In that. Does that support you, Tushima?
Okay. Yeah. And thank you so much. I think Tushima got her answer.
Yeah.
And I hope Sandeep also got his answer here. Yeah. Okay. Okay, we have one more query. I'm just going to read it out. I see it as both the follower and bystander being passive and implementer and contributor being active. I think this is a reframing that's happening.
And
Yeah.
Chitra, thank you so much for pointing out that, because that's exactly what you're going to do in the breakout room. What you're
Yes.
actually going to do is actually see how can you make the active a different kind of an active, and how can you make the passive more active.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what
But
happens in dialogues, right? You can get into a deadlock, or you can keep going around in circles. Nothing happens.
yeah, so Chitra kind of demonstrated what is needed to be done. So what we're going to do now is that we have an activity, which is a breakout room activity. We'll be breaking out in rooms for 10 minutes, right? This will be randomly going to be, we'll have random selection. We'll put 3 to 4 people in a group based on number of participants that are present in the session. And once you're finished having your dialogue, you stay there. And after 10 minutes is over, you will automatically be called back to the main room. So stay there if you're already done. And yeah, that's it. Is that all? Yeah. So in the activity, we are the expectation is to how you can move from one state to the other state. And Vibhu has been kind enough for us to, he clicked the picture of the screen and has posted it on the chat box for all of us. So Nandini, can I, request you to put us all in
Yeah.
breakout rooms? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you
Just
so
a
much.
moment. Yeah.
So while we are, waiting for everybody to get into the breakout room, Saraswati, I had just had a thought that I wanted to share here. So I was in a session, in a team coaching session recently, and I had a guy who, one of the participants, a member who kept on doubting. For everything, he would say that, लेकिन ये ऐसा होता है, लेकिन ये ऐसा नहीं होता. The constant blame thing that was happening. And I picked it up and I said that, we need this perspective where, we want to see the other side of the picture as well. Because when we do that, we'll be able to come up with more solutions for the situation. So is that also reframing that has happened? Would you call it reframing?
So what I heard being done is acknowledgement, saying that what makes this valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then then how do you reframe then?
So if they're saying that, this is how it is done, this is how it is not done. So what would happen if, if we don't stick to this? Right? So there is a different perspective to look at it. So reframing is about providing a different perspective to look at it, a different lens.
So while we acknowledging the doubter, as in somebody who's saying that, now based on the information that this doubter is offering, can we look at the same scenario differently?
Yes. And use themselves to move. So if this doubter, it's like opposing.
Yeah, opposing, exactly. Yeah.
So how can you move them from being an opposer to an inquirer?
Exactly. So what are the thoughts that are coming up to you when you are thinking about the situation? What are the ways? Could be one of the ways of...
What are some of the concerns that you have?
What are the... Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I think that's great, yeah.
Kavita, people are already moving to the breakout rooms.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bharti says she's not well. She would like to listen since interested content could not join the group yet. So Bharti, if you do get into a group, just stay there. Otherwise, you can stay in this room.
Yeah, I'm really not well actually, but I'm
Yeah.
very interested in the content. So yeah.
Sure. I understand. And thank you so much for being
Thanks.
here.
Thank you. And I think whatever I heard is somewhere I was seeking some answers. So thank you for sharing actually. Yeah. Yeah. Mrs. Anand, yeah. Thank you.
Take care.
You can call me Saras. I mean, that's the first time I've been called Mrs. Anand. Please call me Saras.
Actually, I was thinking,
Okay,
who
sir.
is Miss Anand? Yeah, Saras, yeah.
Acknowledge your investment in learning to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that this encourages us, to do more of such session that is valuable. So 10 minutes and I think participants are moving in. Slowly.
There's still 16 people who are
Yeah, it's happening.
not. I got logged out of my
Oh.
breakout room. Can you put me back in?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Which breakout room were you in?
I did not even know. It just went round and
Okay.
round. It was gone suddenly.
Okay. I'll
I-
put you back. I'll
While
put you back.
back.
Give me a moment. Wilson, Venkata, Nivedita Das, Srinivas, they're still here. So are they joining or do you need any help in terms of joining the breakout room? Kavita, should I pause the recording for now?
Please do. What's happening? Would you... Thank you, Nandita, for starting the recording again. And I think most of them are back. Yes. Okay, now back to Saras. Take over and yeah.
Thanks, Kavita. So one of the things I'm going to utilize here is there is no right answer in coaching. So, but it would be interesting to see what some of the, while we can't get everybody's responses there, it might be good to see what are some of those responses that have come in. So, if anybody from maybe 2, 3 teams who really want to share, so they can share and we can see how the questions come up. How does that sound?
You want them to share on chat or you want them to unmute themselves?
I think unmute will be faster. So maybe one team,
Yes.
and maybe whoever, so therefore the burning need I need to share to be able to do that. So anybody who wants to share what came up for in their team?
So I'll probably go first, only because we had time to only discuss the first point, and we might lag in some of the others. And really, I'm representing the thoughts of my colleague, Malachy Feely. By the time we spoke about Ireland and Guinness and then moved on, we also further ran out of time. But he had two very powerful thoughts for the first point. Them being, he says that when we present the power of choice to the other person, saying that, what do you think will have you safe in this place? What do you think would be your rules for creating safety? I thought was very special because you're giving the power of choice and the onus, and you're transferring choice to the other person. So I thought that was significant. The other thing was that Malachy presented that, hey, listen, I'm not perfect as well. And inadvertently, if the facilitator, shows vulnerability or seems to have some sort of half a slip, then, that presents to the others that they don't really have to be on their guard or up to scratch in a manner of speaking. While we were in dialogue, then I reiterated the first point, asked him what the second point was. And I don't know whether he actually forgot his second point or he feigned to forget his second point, but he says, sometimes I forget the points that I make. And he says, hey, that was a demonstration that, listen, he was as if he was giving me a demonstration that he wasn't up to scratch and he was forgetting things. So it was fun. So those 2 points, yes? Okay.
Thank you.
If
Thank
I
you,
may, it wasn't feigned.
Sure. Come on. Okay.
It was real. I did forget, and when Naveen teased it out with me and we talked about it, we recreated it. So it just shows that we are human, but it gave a great platform of safety to actually have that conversation.
Thanks for sharing that.
Could I make a point here, Saraswati? This is Philip from Singapore. Good to join you. The important thing that I feel, and we talked about this in our group, is you don't want to imply that any of those roles that you've put there is wrong, like opposer to inquirer, follower to implementer. There's never a situation in a team when the whole group is stuck in one mode. Because in a team, and I don't know if any of you know the Belbin model, we all have different styles in teams. And so the facilitator creates psychological safety by enabling different groups to express their point of view. So you need a follower and you let them speak, and then you're able to say, okay, we now need some implementation. So psychological safety is very important to make sure that nobody feels that their particular position is anything wrong with it. Does that make sense, Saraswati?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And so this exercise was also to look at if in the dialogue in the team, there is a stuckness that happens where could be in terms of stances, could be in terms of, while all the roles are important, that's when you will have best, kind of an outcome. What could you do knowing that this stuckness is impacting the psychological safety. So possibly, and that's that's a possible consequence that could happen. But how do you actually manage these? How do you actually work with these situations, knowing that, hey, maybe there is an attachment to a point of view or to a particular stance, and
Stuckness
how to
only
deal with it?
happens. Yes, stuckness only happens, Saraswati, because one group or two or three people are dominating conversation. So the team
Absolutely.
coach's role is to enable the noisy people to say, thank you for your point of view. We've heard that loud and clear. There are other points of view in the room. So the team coach establishes the safety, not to make the noisy people feel like they're wrong, but to recognize there's no stuckness of a whole group. There's only one or two people who are too loud sometimes, not to allow the other points of view. So the solution to any issue in a team is present in the team. The team coach's role is to enable those people who've got the solution to be heard without making other people feel bad.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you. And one of the possibilities to do that is to ask a reframe question saying that, what about the point that you're making? What is the challenge that it actually solves? So that they're able to enhance on their perspective and share it with us. Absolutely. What you're saying is absolutely right. Anybody else? If you can.
May I? This is Ruchi.
Yes, Ruchi, please.
Okay, so we had Vibhu and Kiran in the group, and somewhere, while we were discussing, uh, the 10 minutes fell very short. Uh, so this is my feeling that probably we're just at the surface. And it's very interesting to see and to, so while we were discussing, I was visualizing how, it has to play out, how fascinating it would be if you have to facilitate the change of position. Uh, First, be aware of that this is the position that the person is taking, and how, as a coach, you can facilitate that movement. So what came up for us was that from mover to opposer, you can ask questions around risk assessment. What do you think is the risk of what you were suggesting, ideas, and therefore, question the assumptions and the dependency on a particular idea, and then bring them into this mode of challenging what is being discussed. From opposer to mover, we thought, questions around curiosity and questioning can then probably enable them to make that shift from being an opposer to a mover. From a follower to an implementer, it's like the questions around, the goals and timelines can probably make that shift from a person who's just a follower, and then can then get into this mind space of implementing what is being discussed in terms of what are the goals and what's the kind of timelines that they're thinking, what's the kind of support that they need to deliver the things that are being talked about. And from bystander to a contributor, asking questions around what is it that you are thinking about what is being discussed. So getting them out from just being there as a bystander and trying to understand the thought process that they are into. So yeah, so I'm just I don't know, it's just a surface level without being, yeah,
And I think
interesting.
that's
Thank
great
you.
because there were very different perspectives that came up. If I may add just one observation. So when you
Sure,
move from a
please.
bystander, I took your nod as okay. When you move from a bystander becoming a contributor, so what do you think is again at a thought level? So how could you reframe from the bystander who's thinking, who's observing, who's sharing, to becoming a contributor? Just, I hope that supports.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Anything others would like to share? I noticed something in the chat, if I may pick it up. So, I think it's Tushima who's written, at times in a team, opposite comments may be felt as criticism and lead to feelings of being offended. What does the team coach do in such instances to address the emotional fallout? So, but I think that's the whole point. So, at times it could be that the way the the points are, the dialogue is being carried out can impact the psychological safety, and therefore how could you actually ask, how could you actually, and that's for the reframe, help them saying that, okay, so what is it about that you're saying, right? You say that these are, what are your concerns about it, what could be the consequences of it if this were to happen, dot dot dot, can you fill in the blanks? So help them start looking at it from a different perspective, and maybe that will help understand what their perspective is for the entire team.
I have a question. I was just curious as to whether, too much of psychological safety, can it lead to a lack of accountability? Just having too much of your sweet ways. I know psychological safety is not being nice and all that, but if it's not carried out in the right manner and the right balance, then can it lead to a lack of accountability and perhaps, yes, that whole, I wouldn't call it control, but for the lack of a better word right now, yes, a direction in task completion.
Great question, Himani, because yes, so is there something known as too much of psychological safety? Yes. So if there is too much of psychological safety, are you being nice to each other? And that's not what it is. And because it is a felt sense, there is always a calibration that is continuously happening. Right? So that this team and is able to create a psychological safety in a real aspect. And yeah, you're absolutely right. So like I mentioned about this team, things going so beautifully well. There's nothing, so there is no need to change. Then why are we here?
Yeah, right.
Right. So so that was just a. So what do you really want from us?
Yes.
So
thank you. Thanks.
Can I just say something here? Because I think, Himani, you brought up a really, really important point. As psychological safety, it's only been around for 10 years or so, gets stronger and stronger. We need to dispel the notion it's about feeling nice. And I think that psychological safety, to make sure people know right at the beginning, it's about being free to demand accountability. Otherwise, people will say, and culture comes in here, because if you're in a culture which is a collective culture, a diplomatic culture, then they become too safe. And so you need to set the rules right at the beginning that we are going to encourage you, yes, to be caring for each other, to love each other, and love's about psychological safety, but you love sometimes by giving tough love. And so I think
exactly.
It's a really important point you're raising.
Thank you for that.
When
Tough love.
when you're teaching it, make sure that people know it doesn't mean being nice to each other.
Yeah, and we do that with our children. We do that with our children all the time also.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. That explains it. Yeah.
And very well captured. And so, which is why it spoke about process. So right in the beginning, how can you set up the narrative? I mean, it's not something that you said in the beginning and it gets done. So the narrative of why psychological safety, why do you need it? How will it show up? What does it mean? And therefore, how do we also hold each other accountable to whatever it is that we've set ourselves and doing that? Very well said. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing.
Saras, I know we are at 7:30, 7:34 right now, but there are a few questions that we have picked up from the registration. Can we ask you? And if we can, if
Sure.
everybody can extend for about 5-7 minutes, that will be useful. So there is the
I can attempt
psychology.
to answer them.
Okay, okay. Psychological safety, how to handle when it is different in your team and in your organization.
I think that's a brilliant question, which is why I also spoke about the team that you're working with. Where is it nested in the organization? That also plays a part, right? So while this team may be doing what it is doing to maintain psychological safety within them and in the relationship that's happening with the larger system, there could be. So we are hoping that the fish tank. So the fish in the fish tank are able to impact the aquarium, as well, and see what happens there. Which is why it's also, so while it's the leader in that team who helps foster that, who partners to foster that psychological safety. It is, and this has been my personal experience. Maybe I could be wrong. My personal experience has been, if you want to do it as an organization-wide thing, start from the top. If you are working with a team which is nested in the system, let them be realistic about it, and let them also decide what are those norms that they want to hold themselves accountable for, and also how they are going to be with their stakeholders. So that's in their control.
Nice. Thank you for, I completely agree. The psychological safety has to start right from the top. Otherwise, it's not manageable. There's another question. Please recommend a test which can be administered to team to check the current level of psychological safety in the organization.
So I think Amy Edmondson on her website, I think Fearless Organization, there are 7 statements. And those 7 statements are great. And she also says that, just because you've got an answer to that doesn't mean that you take it as it is. You have to now explore the answers with everybody to understand what that really means. So don't take it as a definitive. That's how she says. And those 7 questions are simple, straightforward, and I think and that's available on the website.
What are effective ways to extend psychological safety? Amrendra has asked this.
If I may, to extend psychological safety, as in team to team members, leader to team members, or to the outside organization. I think what coaches do is the best. Can you be curious? And can you ask questions to understand better? And when you do that, you clarify. There is a commonality, there is a common understanding that gets built. I think it's also about maintaining the respect, even if I have a different perspective. So that's the courage to speak and compassion, right? So even if I have a different perspective, how do I extend it to others, saying that, hey, okay, it's fine, things did not work, and we were trying to do this, but it did not work. What can we do now? So extending that same which you do, this is about a nested team as well. How can you do that for your stakeholders? Right? So how can you extend that? I hope that supports.
There's another interesting question. How to address non-attentive team member in a team coaching? Satyajit Samant has asked this.
So there are various different ways to do that. So one, if it has come up as a norm, as a behavior, can the team themselves hold the person accountable? So whatever that inattentiveness is all about, right? So how do you actually help them understand? What would you like to, so if this is the situation, what would you like to do as a team? So it's not about the team coach being the holder of norms, but it's about helping the team themselves create and hold themselves accountable to those norms. Yeah.
What are the quick tips to establish trust as well as safety together? Sunita Sinha has asked.
And I think everything starts with a common understanding and have an agreement around it. What does that mean? How will it show up? Where is it? Have that clarity. And I'm not talking about trust here, I'm talking about psychological safety. Right? Because trust is more interpersonal. And therefore, talking about having that clarity, having that agreement is a good space to start.
Couple of more questions, 2-3 more questions. Is that okay?
Sagu, it's already 7:40. I know this is such an interesting topic, and I think it's like, we can sit all evening, all night, and this is going to go on for us. I think it's somewhere we'll have to take a hard stop, and because we want to do the feedback poll as well, and so I mean, if it's okay. Yeah.
One question.
Yeah, one question.
How do you create foster psychological safety when there is a toxicity and deep lack of trust among the team members?
Sorry, could you repeat that once again?
How do you create a foster psychological safety when there is toxicity and a deep lack of trust among the team members? Ima has asked this.
So it is a tough situation, right? And we also said psychological safety is hard. But I think it starts from, and there is a team that we worked with, and it did not work well, where the team leader, and there's a leadership team, the team leader did not feel the need for psychological safety. And it was in pockets, at least what came from up ground was that it is about not being, not being a toxic culture. So it's about actually having an understanding, saying that, do you really need it? And if you need it, and if you believe that it's not about being nice to each other, it's not about behaviors, it's not about culture. It's about actually the results that you want to get. So do you really mean it? And having that agreement and understanding. So having that, I'm going to say, tough conversation to say that, is that really something that everybody here believes that they need to have?
Thank you so much, Saras. Over to you, Kavita, for the...
Yeah. Thank you so much, Saras. It was an extremely insightful session. And, you would notice that everybody is glued in here, completely focused on every single word that you're sharing with all of us here. So before we go, there are two things we want to do and not miss out. One is to click a group picture. So can I request everybody who's here to put their camera on, and can we have a group picture for the ICF Mumbai Charter Chapter, please? Yeah, and we have Nandini. Nandini, where are you? Yeah, Nandini, please click it. So there are two windows. So I would request everybody to smile, keep smiling until Nandini tells us to stop. 1, 2, 3, go.
My God, it's going.
Yeah.
God, Nandini, what are you doing? You're making a video?
Yes.
Done. Nandini, you're on mute.
Sorry, just one moment. Last time, please.
More. Okay. It's like a portfolio.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, done.
Thank you.
So second
Thank
is
you so much.
Request everybody to share your feedback. It's important for us to know how you've experienced the session today. It encourages us to bring more such sessions for all of you, so that is more relevant in how we can build ourselves to become team coaches and manage team coaching and group coaching engagement as efficiently as possible. So please do fill up the feedback poll. While everybody does that, I'm going to really thank I want to thank Saraswati for this wonderful, insightful session. And you've given us so much in terms of framework. You've told us how to move ahead, the different roles that we can play as a coach in a in a team coaching setting. And I mean, I can see that a lot of people were engaged. Everyone was engaged, sharing their thoughts, ideas. Even the breakout room was very useful for all of us. In fact, a lot of insights came up through that breakout room. So I'm grateful. Yeah. And yeah, thank you everybody for sharing your feedback.